What's going on, everybody? I am AV Obsessed, and if you're watching this video on my channel, that means that you probably are too. And today, I am finally reviewing my Canton Vento speakers. Not just the towers, I'm also going to be reviewing the center channel and the surround speakers, but mostly focusing on the main towers.
Run free and dive into the sky. Hear the wind crying out its prayer. Why are we so ashamed to be alive? Break the chains and our freedom's ours.
So the towers that I have here are the Vento 896.2 DCs, which are a three-way floor standing tower with a downward firing port that stands about 43.5 inches tall, 10 inches wide, and 13.5 inches deep, and they weigh 66 pounds. And it's a three-way design with, now the math doesn't exactly line up evenly with conventional speaker sizes because Canton makes all of their own speaker drivers in Germany, and it's all in metric, so when you convert it to English or imperial measurements, it doesn't line up exactly with your conventional 6.5 inch or 8 inch drivers, but it's a 174 millimeter titanium mid-range driver that equals about a 6.85 inch driver in imperial. And then it's a 1-inch ceramic dome tweeter in its nice little aluminum waveguide here with a metal protective grill over it, so you don't have to worry about kids or animals wrecking your nice, fragile ceramic tweeter dome. And then a pair of 192 millimeter bass drivers, which that maths out to about 7.559 inches. The factory rates these towers to go from 20 hertz to 20 hertz to 40 kilohertz. They don't tell you whether that's a 3 dB, a 6 dB, or a 10 dB down point, but I would assume it's a 10 dB down point. You'll see in the measurements later when I show those. But they are pretty much what I would consider a full range tower. Like, the only thing that you're going to get that's going to have a more full range than a speaker like this is going to be something that's considerably larger, possibly a powered tower. So now the center channel is pretty big and beefy for a center channel. It's 24 inches wide, 8.1 or so inches tall, and 13.5 inches deep, so basically exactly as deep as the tower speakers are, and weighs in at 36 pounds. It's using the exact same 25 millimeter ceramic dome tweeter, or 1-inch ceramic dome tweeter, with the exact same waveguide and a little protective grill over it. And it's actually using the same driver that the towers have as a mid-range, so the same 174 millimeter or 6.85 inch titanium cone woofers as a mid-range and a woofer. So it's crossed over at 300 hertz and 3000 hertz. So it is a full three-way center channel, but it just doesn't have the separate, some center channels will have a woofer on each side and then a very small mid-range driver and then the tweeter above that. This one's still a full three-way. It just looks kind of like it's like a two-way, but it's actually crossed over at 3 different points. So it's a three-way, and it's a rear ported speaker. This speaker is rated for 26 hertz to 40 kilohertz. It doesn't get quite as deep as what Canton claims it does, but it does play pretty deep for a center channel. I keep it crossed over at 40 hertz. That's how low this thing is capable of playing. And last but not least is the two-way on-wall surround speaker. This one in particular is the Vento 816.2, and the modern equivalent to this, because they have refreshed these speakers within the last couple of years, it was just called the Vento 10 now. And it has the same exact 25 millimeter ceramic dome tweeter, and then a bit of a smaller woofer. It's a 155 millimeter titanium cone woofer, which is about 6.1 inches in a sealed enclosure. And these speakers are very, very small. They're only about 4 inches deep, so they do not protrude that far out onto your wall. And they're about 12 inches high and 7.5 inches wide. So they don't take up any space. Like, you mount them to the wall and they just look like a nice little on-wall speaker. They're not protruding too much, and they can play a pretty decent range of sound as well. I keep mine crossed over at 80 hertz, but as you'll see in the graphs later, I think I was getting down into the 60s with these very small on-wall speakers. So I have had these speakers for about 5 years now. I got them in spring of 2020, and it is now spring of 2025. Before I got these speakers, I had a full set of the Q series. So I had the Q950 towers, which are the biggest towers in the Q series line, the previous generation before the Q series Metas came out. And then I had the Q650C, which was the biggest center channel in that series. And then I had the Q150s that I used as surround speakers mounted to the rear wall. And I had the Q50A Atmos height channel speakers mounted up high. And I have an old image that I can dig up and put up so that you guys can see what that setup looked like. But I was never like super thrilled with the sound of that system, and I only kept that system for about a year before I sold off all those speakers so I could buy these Cantons. And when I first got these Cantons, there was such a huge difference and such a huge upgrade in sound quality and just clarity that there were actually a couple of times where I had to jump up out of my chair to because like the sound like freaked me out and made me think something was actually going on physically inside of the house. The first example of that was I was listening to the song Strobe by Deadmau5, and I'd heard that song, you know, probably at least dozens of times before on the Kefs, and then the speakers that I had before the Kefs, which were the Klipsch RF62s. And when I first heard that song through these speakers, playing it at fairly high volumes, there's a part of the song at 1 minute and 45 seconds in where it's a very, very sudden and sharp sounding like sound that's mixed into the audio, and it literally made me jump up off of my chair, because in my old house before we moved here, I live in Southern California now, but before I lived here, we had a house in Wisconsin, and we actually had steam heat in that house with the radiators and like the boiler in the basement that heated up the water so that the steam would go through the radiators and heat up the house. And that sound was so sharp and so clear, I literally jumped up off of my chair because I thought one of those pipes had burst and there was steam spewing into the room. It was just crazy. And then another time where I jumped up out of my chair was when I was watching the movie, I believe it's called Nixon versus Frost or something like that. But there's a part in that movie where they're doing the interview, and one of the like flash bulbs or like the studio lights or whatever explodes, and it like, you know, it's a very, very loud and sudden sound of glass shattering. And in my old house, like if I had this set up like this, the kitchen was actually like off to that side of the system, and I legitimately thought that some glass thing just all of a sudden shattered in the kitchen because it was so sudden and clear and sharp. And the soundstage of the speaker made it sound like it was coming from beyond the side of the speaker. So I legitimately like got up and looked around in the kitchen and didn't find anything, and went back to the movie and like played that scene again. And then like, because I paused it immediately after I heard that shattering sound, so I didn't really like I paused it before the characters on screen reacted to it. And so I legitimately like just tricked myself, and if I would have continued watching the movie a couple seconds longer, I would have known that it was, you know, in the movie. So enough with the stories about how these speakers sound and how big of an upgrade it was over the Q950s. let's talk about the actual frequency response. And honestly, I don't have to talk about it too much because it's almost as perfect as you can get. I'll put up the graphs now, and you'll see that pretty much once you get past the like 300 hertz or so range, where the sound gets very messed up because of the room interactions and, you know, room gain and room nodes and stuff like that. Once you get past that, these speakers are almost dead flat. Like, it's absolutely insane how close to the reference level, because I measured these with a reference volume of 75 and 85 dB, and you can see that once you're past that 300 hertz range that's all dominated by the room, these speakers are just almost dead flat and hug that line. There's like less than a 1.5 decibel variance in volume from frequencies from 30 up to like 18,000 hertz, and then it very, very slightly rolls off until it gets to 20 kilohertz. And you can see with there's obviously that huge peak that I have at like 45 hertz. That's the room where I'm gaining like an extra 10 decibels of bass at 45 hertz because of a room mode where the waves are just building up on each other. But the bass on these speakers comes in, like, I'm at 75 or 85 dB, like at reference volume, by about, I believe, if I remember right, because I'm not actually looking at the graphs right now, but you guys might be, 25, 26 hertz, something like that. The speakers are already rolling into the bass like pretty strong. And then there's a little bit of a dip at around, I think it's 250 hertz. But yeah, then once you're up to 300 hertz, it's just so ruler flat. It's crazy. Like, that's why these speakers are my reference speaker. Like, anytime I'm reviewing any other speaker, like, how do they compare to the Cantons? And like, it's gonna be really hard to find something that beats them. Yeah, they're absolutely insane when it comes to the frequency response, just as ruler flat as I could ever expect almost any speaker to be. It figures, doesn't it? Leave it up to the Germans to build a speaker that is incredibly precise and accurate to the source. The frequency response of the center channel as well is also just insanely flat. Like, the bass doesn't roll in quite as soon as it does with the towers, which is obviously going to be what you would expect for a center channel. But it is rolling in that mid 30s range, I believe. And then once you get past that 300 hertz range, it's dead level again with the reference volume, like where it's supposed to be. And the surround speakers, pretty similar. They're obviously not quite as flat, and they don't have nearly as much bass because they're a little tiny, like, low profile on-wall speaker with a smaller woofer, and it's a sealed enclosure, so they can't have the same kind of bass extension as the towers in the center channel can. But they play pretty good once you get past the room interaction zone of 300 hertz and below. And yeah, they blend in extremely well with the towers. I set the crossover point for those at 80 hertz, so all the bass that would be in the surround channels gets offloaded to the subwoofer, and it blends very well, and it's a very, very satisfying surround experience. So the frequency response from these speakers is pretty much perfect, in my opinion. For a speaker of this size and price point, the capabilities that these speakers have to reproduce sound is incredible. Like, it's just so insane how flat the frequency response is. Like, what signal comes in is the sound that comes out, with the speaker not really like messing it up too much. So the next most important thing about how a speaker performs is its soundstage and imaging, because there are some speakers that can have like a super, super amazing frequency response, but they don't image like at all. And these speakers, I would say, are probably on a fairly high level as far as the imaging, but a couple of things about them is they are fairly placement dependent as far as imaging goes. I don't know exactly why that is, if it's because of the fact that they're a fairly shallow speaker with a flat front baffle instead of having a curved front baffle to give it a wider dispersion. But if you don't set them up properly, like, it's kind of incredible how easily you can mess it up, because right now the way that I have them set is essentially perfect. So when I'm sitting in my listening position, if the song is recorded properly, the singer sounds like they're coming from like the center channel or the TV. Like, I fairly often, even though I've had these things for years now, I still fairly often have to once in a while get up off the couch and go put my ear up to the center channel to make sure that I didn't somehow switch the receiver's like sound settings to surround mode, because I obviously, when I'm listening to music, I just want it to be in like 2-channel, like pure direct mode. And the center imaging is so good that I fairly often have to get up and check the center channel to make sure that it's not playing, which is good. But if I were to take either one of these speakers, like if I take that, let's say I take that left speaker and just change where it's pointed. Like right now it's towed in like fairly close, but it's still a little wide of the listening position. That's how I have both of the speakers. They're not pointed directly at me, but like basically, you know, kind of out here. If you put a laser pointer on the speaker, they'd probably be pointing, you know, 2 or 3 feet to each side of me. But if I were to take that speaker and just move it out a little bit more, so it's towed out just a little tiny bit more, it makes a massive difference in where the center image is. Now, instead of the center image being like here, it's gonna be like here. If I move that speaker, like if I move the front baffle at speaker like that much, it's gonna set the soundstage way off. So positioning is pretty important with these, like dialing it in and getting it right is super important. And I have them about a foot away from the front wall, which I know like a lot of the audiophiles are going to be like, you need to pull those speakers further out into the room. I have experimented with that, and I've found like there's fairly minimal difference with these speakers, pulling them further out into the room, and being that I don't have the largest room ever here, it's only 13 feet from this wall to that wall. I don't have the room to have these 3 feet out into the room. So, but I have tried that, and it doesn't seem to make a massive difference as far as the sound staging or like causing the bass to be boomy, which is probably down to the fact that the speakers have a downward firing port. If they were rear ported, I probably would have to pull them further away from the front wall to make it so that the bass isn't so boomy. But thankfully they thought about that, and they set the bass port at the bottom of the speaker. It shoots into a separate little plinth that essentially spreads the bass out in all directions. So it's not shooting straight out of a port at the back wall or at the wall behind them, which is really nice. So I get a really good locked in center image, and then like, you know, stuff panning left and right can very often sound like it extends beyond the sides of the speakers, which is excellent. The only thing where I would say they might be a little bit lacking is I don't really get that 3D soundstage, which, I mean, this might be down to the fact that I don't have them pulled out that far from the front wall. But like I said, it hasn't really made a difference the times that I've tried it. But I don't really hear a lot of that depth of soundstage. I don't hear like, you know, oh, it sounds like the singer is out in front, the drummer is behind, and like, you know, I don't get that so much with these. It's pretty much a big 2-dimensional soundstage, but it doesn't give me that 3-dimensional soundstage. I would say that's probably the one weak point of these speakers. So if these speakers are so good, why the heck aren't they a bigger, like, household known name brand in the US? And honestly, that's a good question to me, because these things, they look amazing, they sound amazing. They're actually, you know, for a speaker that is, you know, designed, engineered, and built in Germany, like, they're a fairly reasonable price for the quality that you're getting. I genuinely don't know what the reason is why they're not a bigger household name here in the US. And it might just come down to the size of the company. Maybe they're not a big enough factory to, produce enough speakers to serve the US market that well, so they don't try to push harder into the US market. I guess right now with the whole import tariff situation, they probably wouldn't be trying to increase their footprint in the US for a while either. But it probably comes down to that and the distribution side. From what I found, like I'm drawing a blank right now. It's either Bluebird Audio or Blue Jay Audio, but they are the distributor for Canton in the US, and they're sold on like the website soundapproach.com, and I think maybe one other one, but they're really not like that big of a name here in the US, and the sellers that do sell them don't even seem to have like every model available. So yeah, I wish that they were I wish that some giant chain like a much bigger well-known company like Crutchfield, or God, it'd be amazing if they had these at Best Buy, because then people could actually see them and hear them. And Canton makes such a wide range of speakers, like the Vento series here. Like, I mean, the ones that I have, it's the Vento 896.2 DC tower, the 866 center channel, and the 816 on-wall surrounds. They have updated these since I bought mine. There seems to be very little difference between mine and the new version. But the new version, if you're going to try to search for these, the center channel is called the Vento 50. The towers, this size tower would be the Vento 90. These 896s were the biggest towers in the Vento series when I got mine, but now they have a Vento 100, which has dual, I believe it's like an 8.1 or 8.5 inch woofer, and then the on-wall speakers are the Vento 10. But they make such a wide range of speakers as well, which is why it'd be really cool for a company like Best Buy or Crutchfield to have them, because like the Vento series is the second from the highest end. They have the reference series too, which look incredible. And actually the guy from Pursuit of Perfect Systems just did a review of, I believe, like the second biggest towers in the new Canton reference line, and he said that they were some of the best speakers that he's ever reviewed, which doesn't surprise me. But even for him in the UK, that was his first experience with Canton speakers, but he also said that they're one of the best speakers that he's ever reviewed. So that it like genuinely doesn't surprise me, because I've had mine for 5 years and I love them. They sound so good. But yeah, they have the reference series, the Vento series, they have the Chrono series below this, they have the Ergo series, which I'll get into a little bit of detail about those in a minute, and then they have the GLE. And the GLE is the entry-level speakers, and even their entry-level speakers, because before I went all in and spent like a couple grand on all of the Vento series speakers, I bought a pair of I believe they were called the GLE 336 bookshelf speakers, which were the biggest bookshelf speakers in the GLE series. And I was so blown away by how good those bookshelves were that's what kind of made me decide, okay, I could go ahead and buy the Vento series and get the whole 5-speaker package to get the surround sound system from them. But those GLE speakers were so good, and I believe the website Accessories for Less was selling them back when I bought them in 2020. That pair of speakers was $400. Like, they were so cheap, but they sounded so good, it kind of like boggled my mind. So that was kind of how I dipped my toe into the Canton range. So yeah, the GLE series, really, really good bang for the bucks, but they're super basic with just like your generic vinyl wrap and stuff like that. And then what it looks like, at least, I'm not 100% sure if this is for like what they actually do, but the Ergo series it's like the same drivers and possibly the same crossovers, but maybe upgraded crossovers as the GLE series, but they use real wood veneers and like nicer speaker grills and stuff like that on the Ergo series. And then they have the Chrono series, which looks like the Chrono series is the same drivers as the Vento series, but it doesn't have the nice like curve to the speaker cabinet. Like it's a much more basic looking speaker cabinet. And then the Vento series, it looks like it's the same drivers as the Chronos, but with probably an upgraded crossover and updated cabinet. And then the Reference series is just their ultimate like cost no object series. But in every one of those series except for the Reference series, they don't make any on-wall surrounds or Atmos channels, but in the GLE series and the Chrono series and the Vento series, it's not just it's not like some brands where you can only buy like, you know, nice high quality bookshelves and towers from them. They make a center channel, several towers, several bookshelves, on-wall surrounds, and height channels for every one of the series that they make. So they make an insane amount of speakers, honestly, and like basically it's you could serve any customer if you had the like, let's say you're a dealer and you had the Canton speakers, you could serve any customer from the high-end 2-channel customer to like the entry-level home theater, entry-level 2-channel high-end home theater. Like they actually make enough speakers to serve all of those people. Like, so it just honestly boggles my mind that this brand isn't bigger here in the US. And it honestly, I'm starting to sound like an infomercial for Canton, but I like these speakers a lot, as you could tell. So I wish that more companies would sell these speakers here in the US. So that is my review of the Canton Vento series of speakers and my 2 cents on why I think this brand isn't bigger in the US, but I feel like it should be. Another thing I forgot to mention when I was talking about these speakers is I, for a little while, had a pair of Focal Electra 1028 BEs in my living room, which are, you know, an older speaker from Focal, but with the beryllium tweeter and a 6.5-inch woofer and dual 6.5-inch, or a 6.5-inch mid-range and dual 6.5-inch woofers. So they're a tower that's a similar size to my Cantons here, and like I was A/B'ing them and genuinely liked the sound of the Cantons better. So that was kind of a crazy comparison that I did way back before I started this channel. But yeah, like just incredible speakers. They look great. They sound great. They're built extremely well. They even come with a 5-year factory warranty from Canton. They're built in Germany. Like, there's so few downsides to them. The only downsides, like I said, they're a little bit finicky when it comes to the positioning, and they don't really give you that 3-dimensional soundstage where you can actually hear like the depth, like difference between instruments or singers in the soundstage. But yeah, incredible speaker. Gonna be really hard to beat. These are my reference speakers that I compare everything to, and for good reason. You guys saw in the graphs how close to the reference line they actually play. They are so good. If you guys are a manufacturer or you know any manufacturers and you guys want to send me speakers to review, there is an email that you can reach out to in the description for this video. And if you guys watched all the way to the end here and you liked the video, then make sure you give it a thumbs up and make sure you subscribe to the channel. I'm hoping to be able to start getting some things brought in from manufacturers so that I can review things more often and start trying to put out more videos. I want to get to 10,000 subscribers by the end of the year. So if you guys can subscribe and then share this video with some of your audiophile friends so they can subscribe too, that would be greatly appreciated, and I'll see you guys in the next video.